Healing Half with Mickey Spear, where we take less than 30 minutes to learn how to address our own wounds as well as help others with theirs. And tonight's show is going to be one that I have been looking forward to for a very long time because we have talked so much about grief, which is great. But I want to talk also about other situations that are hard. I know in the past we've had people come on and talk about divorce, addiction, depression, and tonight's episode is about verbal abuse. So I just wanted to put that out there ahead of time. If you think this might be a little tough of a topic for you to listen to, it's okay. You can head on out now. However, if you want, please stick with us. I think you're really going to love Tiffany and all that she has to say. And this affects so many people that even if you personally aren't experiencing it or have experienced it, odds are you're going to meet somebody one day who does, and we're going to learn how we can help them more effectively. So tonight's show is going to be packed full of great information. I can't wait. But before we bring on the wonderful Tiffany, I just wanted to introduce myself and get to know you a little bit too. So in the comment section, and depending on how you're watching it, it might be above, below, or to the side of me, please put in where are you calling in from and how your day's going. Are you having a good day, a bad day? All weather welcome, which we'll talk about that here in just a second. So I'm Mickey Spear. I am a grief musician, author, and talk show host. And when I was 13 years old, my mom died of cancer. I spent the better part of a decade pretending I was fine, avoiding feeling any hard emotions at all, and really buying into that lie that I should be strong enough to not need help. Well, obviously, that lie is not true, and you can't run away from grief for forever. So it caught up to me, and it caught up to me hard. And eventually, I went to counseling, read tons of books, and not that we're ever through grief, right? We're never done with it. But I now have learned the absolute power and joy that comes from processing hard emotions. And that's what the whole show is about. That's the mission of the show, is to encourage people that whatever you're going through matters. It's not to be dismissed. And I want to offer you tools and resources and perspectives of folks that maybe you can't relate to. That's going to help us love other people better too. So that's the show. I've got a lot of great music and stuff coming out. So make sure we are connected. In the comment section, I put my website. Please, please, please sign up for my weekly resource email. You'll get all of the links, all the show notes, the replays of the show in that one email that gets sent out every Tuesday. So without further ado, let's bring on the wonderful Tiffany to talk about this extremely important topic. Tiffany, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Mickey. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, the honor is all ours. Everybody in the comments, give Tiffany a big hello. It's so great to have you here. So you're going to be sharing your story, and I think maybe, first of all, thank you for being willing to share, because I know this is a story that a lot of people are afraid to sometimes talk about. So really grateful for you and your bravery. Do you mind just kind of maybe starting with that?
Sure, yeah. I mean, start at the very beginning, I guess. Maybe not the very beginning, but I'll start with my name, which is I am Tiffany Slutzdazer. I have been in many toxic abusive relationships in my especially the last decade of my life, and that has catapulted me and inspired me to heal, learn, and then help others in that. So right now, I currently am a state certified peer support specialist and integrated wellness coach. Um, I did just spend the last 11 years in Los Angeles working in the entertainment industry, and that is honestly where um, a lot of it started to happen. Where I'm in an industry where my self worth gets really tore down. I mean, everyone hears about the entertainment industry. We've heard a lot about the Me Too stuff happening these last couple of years, and my self worth started to take a big hit, which then allowed for a lot of toxic people to come into my life, and a lot of abuse from that, and then cycles where even if I got out of one of them, I ended up in another one and another one, and what part of that I had to own for myself to say, okay. In order for me to empower myself and say I do have control in this, move out of that victim mentality, what part of this can I own so I can make a change? There's a quote that I love that says, "What we're not changing, we're choosing." And it sometimes like hits you in the face. You're like, but I didn't choose for this person to speak to me that way, you're right, you didn't. And you should never have to, like, there's no excuse for it. However, I love to empower people by reminding them that you have a choice, which means we can do something different to help move you out of this space, out of the abuse. So it started with my first abusive boyfriend. A couple years after I moved to LA, we lived together. He was physically, verbally, emotionally abusive. I moved out of that into a marriage that ended up being emotionally abusive, went through a divorce, and then had a couple more after that that were emotionally and verbally abusive. And so um, I really love, and what I've been working in this last year, I've been working at a women's mental health and wellness facility. And I really love helping to serve my clients. So many of them, the women that sit on my couch were me. Just like, I was like looking at me, listening to a woman who was in this toxic cycle with someone, and what talents are still in us that makes it hard to move on. And working and helping women through that. And here's the thing, in spite everything about, the relationships I've been in, men also can be, the on the flip side of this, they can be the ones that are living with this from a woman. And so I don't want men to think that, I'm saying anything against them. I love working with men as well. I have a real passion in my heart for men as well. So it can go both ways. Abuse can go both ways. We hear about a little more, like with the Me Too movement, women, but just for all you men out there, just know that I see you and hear you as well. But from my experience, I deal with a lot of women. And I started to get a real passion when I was going through my divorce, is when I saw my first therapist. And that is when I started really delving into the world of healing and healing myself. And it's a journey, and it's not a straight line. It looks like this. I mean, you talk about grief a lot, right? We talk about the 5 stages of grief. It's not a sweet little straight line, right, Mickey?
No, it's
It's not.
not.
Exactly. It's like, oh, we're bouncing all over the place. And I mean, honestly, there's a lot of grieving, especially with ambiguous loss, that goes into when you're trying to leave an abusive, toxic relationship. You're grieving the loss of a life that you're never going to have, one that you probably dreamed of. Those are probably some of the hopes that keep you stuck in the situation you're in. And so allowing yourself to grieving is found in a lot of places. And so anyway, when I was going through my divorce, I met my first therapist, started falling in love with all the books that she recommended. And that actually inspired me. After reading, and I have the book here because made a huge difference in my life. It's called The Body Keeps the Score. And it is incredible the way our body holds trauma. And that book actually changed my life when it came to my divorce, because I realized that what I was living with was emotional abuse. And for some reason, I thought, well, he didn't hit me, so I don't have to, I don't have any reason to leave. And that book gave me permission to say, nope, emotional abuse is just as bad as physical abuse. Verbal
Mm.
abuse, emotional abuse, they're all just as bad for some reason. And I think, we maybe we're going to talk about this later, but um, that myth, I think a lot of women or people believe, is that, well, he didn't hit me. It's not that bad. And so I'm just want to remind all of you that you are an exquisite, beautiful human being that came here for a purpose that has value. And so the way people talk to you is just as important as whether they lay fingers on you and hands. And I dare say that for my own experience, that the mental and emotional abuse was almost worse than the physical abuse, because the physical abuse healed in like a week or two, whereas it's taken years and years to undo some of the pain and the trauma that came from that verbal and emotional and mental abuse. So I just want to give all of you out there that are thinking like, well, it's not that bad, like maybe he speaks to me that way, or like verbally attacks me in that way, or emotionally breaks me down with his words or his actions, but he hasn't ever hit me. It's still just as bad. So
Mm.
yeah, so that book was very freeing for me. That's what gave me I guess I needed in my mind, the permission to leave something that was hurting me. And so I did. Unfortunately, I'm still on my healing journey. I was still on my healing journey. So we repeat the patterns that we're not able to heal. So I did end up in some other abusive relationships after that.
Mm.
And the thing that I have still and am still finding today that it comes down to is the relationship with ourselves. So I love relationships. I love working with relationships. Um, and I love relationships as well because it's a lot about the one we have with ourselves. So
Mm.
I am a constant like lifelong learner. I will never know everything, and I am never going to be perfect. So I am still learning myself so many things and new ways to respect and love myself. Um, Coming from a family that was very codependent, bad at setting boundaries. Now that I have some ideas of why I do some of these things, it's, awareness is where it all begins. We can't really help heal anything until we are aware that it's there. And so to see and kind of reveal some of these things from our past, so much comes from our childhood and our past. So how we can pinpoint those, and so we can kind of hone in and figure out, okay, how can we unpack this a little bit? And I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a therapist. I don't claim to be. I'm a peer support specialist and an integrative wellness coach. So, a peer support specialist is essentially someone who has had a diagnosis themselves, has walked through it, and is now far enough along in their journey where they have that lived experience to say, "Hey,
Mm.
I've been there. I know that feeling, and this is what helped me. Do you want to try that?" And then integrating a wellness coach is I just help try and bring balance to the four body systems, which were your mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual body systems, and what's trying to bring some balance to those. Um, so that is who I am in a nutshell. I'm now located in Minnesota. I moved back to Minnesota. I grew up here till I was 18. And so now I'm back in Minnesota and just serving people in my home state with the lived experience that I got in LA. Also, very glad to be back around family after the whole COVID thing. It's definitely a lot nicer in Minnesota than it probably would have been in LA because of just the sheer amount of people. So grateful for that little plot twist in my story. And so happy because I got to meet Mickey here, and it's just
Ah!
been so nice to talk with her and hear her story and just find the people in Minnesota too that are on the same team of like helping people heal. So that's
Oh, you
me.
are so you're so sweet. Well, first of all, thank you. That is way so kind of you to say. I'm so glad that we met too. There's a billion questions running through my mind as I listen to your story. So I think I'm gonna take it a half step, maybe down to like the most basic
Sure.
level of what does you mentioned like hitting and physical abuse, like that seems so obvious to us. Like, yeah, an
Yeah.
aggressive action, the physical behavior, check.
Uh
But
huh.
what really does emotional or verbal abuse look like?
Sure. So, if it's okay, I'm going to bring up this book. It's called
Mhm.
Nonviolent Communication. Again, I love books, so please, I love to reference books that have helped, and Marshall B. Rosenberg is the author on this one. But if I may, I'm just going to read the back for he'll put it more eloquently than I will. So, um, if violent means acting in ways that result in hurt or harm, then much of how we communicate could indeed be called violent communication. So this is what, if you're experiencing or have experienced, or maybe, again, let's take accountability. Maybe we've been this person sometimes unintentionally, right? So judging others, bullying, having racial bias, blaming, finger pointing, discriminating, speaking without listening, criticizing others or ourselves, name calling, reacting when angry, using political rhetoric, being defensive, or judging who's good or bad or what's right or wrong with people. Obviously, those are like, it's quite a bit there. In my experience, a lot of it was gaslighting, manipulation, um, just honestly like very intense language. So lots of swearing, name calling, just tearing down, saying like, "Oh God, you're so annoying," that type of thing. Telling me I have no purpose, have no friends, and then just the blatant, uh, the cussing me out and things like that. Um, and it can be, and like I said, it can be that manipulation as well, where they get in, they call you crazy for like thinking or having needs when you ask for something. Oh, you're just so needy, you're crazy. And that can start to twist your mind and you're like, am I crazy? Like to have this human need? When you confront them about something, and I like how they said here about like reacting. So there's reacting and there's responding, and so that's a lot of times in a communication. So relationships so often come down to communication. If there's issues, a lot of times it starts with communication. So reacting versus responding, and what's the difference with that? Reacting is that flying off the handle, very emotionally led. responding is, I hold respect for you and myself in this conversation, so I'm going to think before I speak. I'm going to speak in a tone that's not aggressive or, blaming or anything like that. And so often with a lot of my abusive relationships, it was reaction, reaction, reaction. It was just firing, firing, firing. Um, and again, what that does, the danger in that, it might seem like nothing, right? You're probably sitting here like, oh, okay, like a little fight. Well, even that, like you can respectfully argue and disagree with each other. It's when it gets nasty, if you're gonna like define it like this is kind of nasty, there we are. We're starting to get into that, that verbal abuse area where it's just, it's uncalled for. It's not right in a relationship. It's not right for humans to treat each other like that. Again, you are an exquisite being here on this planet, made and brought here for a reason. So no one, including yourself, has a right to treat you and talk to you that way. And so often, I wasn't equipped with the right boundaries to say, shut it down. I'm walking away. Or maybe I was, but my living situation at the time caused me to become more complacent because I didn't know a way out. So I just started to agree or I started to shut down. And so all of a sudden my voice was being taken away. So because their verbal assaults or aggression was so heavy that the only way I could figure out how to stop was to shut mine. And that was probably the biggest problem in my marriage was I felt like I had no voice. I had no say because if I did, then that would ensue and it would leave me in such a tumultuous place inside that I couldn't it was just really hard. So I just learned to be quiet, to just shut down, to shut up.
Mm.
And so after I got out of my divorce, I actually started it was called the Finding My Voice Project, where I challenged myself to post a little YouTube ukulele cover because I also am a singer. I went to school for musical theater way back when. And I realized that in that relationship, I had just every time I wanted to be myself and use my talents, I got shut down, just tore down, shut down. And so I wanted to try and bring pieces of myself back by exercising, using literally and figuratively my voice again. And so I started a Finding My Voice project where again, it was a small little thing. I would post like one verse of a cover, putting it out there because that was the only stage I could have at that moment was YouTube. And, it's risky with all the internet, some of the internet trolls out there. But that was part of it. I was like, I'm going to challenge myself and say, I don't care what people say. I'm doing this for me because I want to find my voice again. So yeah, verbal abuse it's tied in a lot for me with emotional abuse. Again, a lot of times it's the words, and I'm sure I don't know if how many people have heard of the five love languages. I love the five love languages. I have that book somewhere here. I highly recommend it, especially if you're in a relationship, to learn about each other, to learn what language there is, quality of time, words of affirmation, touch, gifts, and acts of service. So my two are touch and words of affirmation. They're tied on the top. I love to tell people I'm a cuddler that likes compliments, and if you can do that, I'll be happy as a clam. So I I I words for me are very important. Good words have a lot of weight, bad words have a lot of weight. And so especially for me when some of that verbal abuse started coming in, the tearing down, the aggressive words that were coming at me, it really affected me. It was like getting hit in the face with a sandblaster every time. And not everyone will have that same reaction to it, but for me, especially because my love language is words, they mean a lot to me. Um, the bad ones also hit extra hard. And so it emotionally started to tear me down mentally and emotionally. And so if I will say, I believe what verbal and again, I'm not a professional therapist, but in my own experience of what I found was that what kept me in that vicious cycle was because the catch 22 of it was that that verbal abuse broke me down emotionally to where my self-worth was gone, where I didn't believe I had any worth to get out of the relationship. Again, you kind of get manipulated and gaslit with using words. Um, so you feel kind of stuck or you kind of get trapped in there and you don't really can't see a way out. And then your self-worth is just so low that um, you don't believe that you really deserve more than what this relationship is giving
Mm.
you. And so that is where I am always a student of life am at in my, still in my journey is learning how to mend and choose that relationship with myself first. What does that look like if in this situation I chose me? And I know Mickey and I were talking a little bit before this, and there's that moment in the movie The Holiday where Kate Winslet's character has been like off and on with this manipulative man, and finally she's like, "Get out! Like I'm done with this, but whatever this toxic thing is, like get out." And I was like, that moment is the moment we hope for, of just like when we finally choose ourselves over that manipulative person that has now played mind games and tore us down and gotten our self-worth to so low that we don't even believe that we're worthy of someone that might treat us well. And honestly, we might not even believe that person exists out there, whether romantic or even friends, or maybe depending on how our parents were. Maybe we've never had an example of what it feels like to be treated with respect, with the treasured human being that we are. And so we don't even really have a reference. And so we just think, well, this is just how it is. Like, I don't know. I'm here to tell you, if you're being treated that way, that's not how it's supposed to be. Um, and the person that can change that is you. You can. I know you feel like you can't right now, but you can, by getting help, leaning on people, having coaches or therapists or people that can help give you tools. And again, at the end of the day, you're the only one that can use them. And it is going to be a journey. I went back many times to men that I got rid of, and then they came back, and I let them back in because I was still healing. And I have a very big heart. I'm an empath. I love helping people. And so a lot of times they still were able to manipulate me by using their words to say, "I'm so sorry. You're the best thing that ever happened. I promise I'll do everything." And because I am who I am, I love to give people chances to believe the best in them, and that's not a bad quality. It was just the wrong people that were hurt people hurt people. These are people that are hurting themselves, that they need to be working on their own healing. Otherwise, they're going to keep hurting people, including us. So, it's coming down to still choosing myself in that moment over being the nice person to like, well, oh, but they said they're sorry. And again, I don't want to shame myself for it, but we learn, okay? It happened to
Mhm.
me more than once. So I'm here to tell you, if you're like, oh man, yep, that's me. I took them back. Girl, I see you. Like that was me. It still is me, honestly. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm baffled myself. Like sometimes I'm like, I know the answer to this. Why is this so hard? And and again, that's where like coaches and people, therapists can be really helpful, because we're so close to emotionally to the situation, that people outside of us can help guide us through that with the tools and things. Help remind you that being taught to that way isn't normal. It's not
Mm.
healthy. um, you know being that accountability for what do you want, what's the life you want, what's the partner in the relationship you want, what's the relationship you want with yourself. I saw a quote once that said, we abuse ourselves more than anyone will ever abuse us. And at first I prickled, because I was like, as someone that's been abused, I was like, what? And then I realized, wow, I think it might be right. I think I've probably abused myself by the way I've spoken to myself, more than anyone ever has. And can I change that? Yes, I can. I can choose to change that literally right now by just starting to talk to myself differently. So some of that verbal abuse, again, accountability is a good thing. How much of that verbal abuse is coming from my own self? Me, I am
Mm.
the queen of beating myself up. I look in the mirror sometimes, I'm like, you are stupid and worthless and ugly, and it's like, like I wouldn't say that to my enemy, like let alone how am I saying it to myself? So mending some of that relationship with our inner child, that little girl, that little boy inside of us that just has wanted to be seen and heard their whole life. If we can form a new relationship with that part of ourselves and saying, I see you, I'm an adult now and I'll take care of you, which means I'm not going to sit here and talk to you that way, little
Mm.
girl. I found I don't know if you guys ever did this, but in preschool, we had made little ornaments when we were younger. And I went home for Christmas one year and I saw this little ornament on the tree with my little like 4-year-old preschool
Yep.
picture in. Yeah. And I had this epiphany like moment. I sat there just looking at it and being like, she's so cute. Look at that. I'm like, that's me. And I was like, wow. And I broke down crying because I realized that I have been so horrible to that little girl. And that's still me. And the things that I say to myself now, the things that I allow, the way I allow people to treat me right now, if I saw anybody doing that to that little girl, I would go all like mama bear on them. And so like
Yeah.
how like where what happened between there then and where we are now that somehow got us to believe that we're not worthy of love and respect. Um and so I'm just here to remind you that you still are. That 4-year-old little girl is still inside of you, and she just wants you to choose her over this toxic relationship, which I get it. There might be positives to it. And I get it. There's some situations that are really hard because there's finances involved or kids involved or things like that. Um, but I'm telling you, especially if you can find some help to keep walking out through it, if this is my one life that I get a chance to live, I don't want to spend it miserable like that. I've spent enough years of my life miserable. And even though I don't have it all figured out yet, I still want to keep making steps in the direction of the life that I want to live. So,
Mhm.
yes, I forget what the question was, Mickey, but I hope that answered it.
Oh my gosh, it answered it and then some. And so kind of the last question is we kind of have a couple minutes left. Is there anything one of us who maybe is witnessing a friend and we're hearing these stories and maybe we even hear some of those comments where we're like, "Whoa, not
Mhm.
okay." Is there anything anyone said to you that was really helpful or vice versa, really hurtful that we should be aware of? And then, of course, if you don't mind just ending with where can people find you? And for
Mhm.
everyone watching, just know all the books, all the connections, all the links that we're talking about, we'll make sure we put in the show notes in that email.
Yes. So, yeah, I would say as with anyone with abuse, like if you know of someone that's going through abuse, it can be a very sensitive subject, right? A lot of times there's a kind of bonding that happens and you can look it up like Stockholm syndrome and stuff like that where you almost become bonded to your abuser. And so you'll get protective of it. And so even though the friends around you can see that it's toxic, the person in it, it's like you can't see the forest through the trees. And so it might be a sensitive thing to bring up to your friend. And so I love using this little tool anytime I try to approach a touchy subject or maybe, just want to be honest with someone, which I just ask, are you open to some feedback? Are you open to some feedback? Are you open if I were to share with you something that I'm seeing right now in your life? And I'm only saying this because I love you. Um, and then it's also just planting that seed. You might plant that seed for someone and tell them that, and they might get angry and be like, "He does not do that. What are you talking about?" But in those moments of truth where and they will happen, it might be months, weeks, years, like you don't know. But they'll that might be the seed that's planted where the next time something bad happens, it might spark for them. Maybe there is something wrong. I mean, my friend told me that. And so just planting those seeds again by asking, are you open to the truth? Because I think sometimes what was hard for me is like so many people would tell me their opinions and I didn't want to hear it because I felt so stuck in the middle of it that it was just like I okay, I get it, fine. I would get like frustrated, but I didn't know what to do about it. And also just then if they are open to it, offering, you know what? Maybe I don't have all the answers, but I will walk with you and support you through this and help you find the right resources, the right tools. It's not going to be an overnight fix. It's not. This is like it takes how many years for the damage to happen, so it's going to take some time for healing and things like that. There's attachment is a big thing in relationships. There's attachment styles and love attachments, but those are a big thing. A lot of times it's not love, it's attachment. And so breaking that attachment and what that looks like, it's all a process. But so yeah, I think the biggest thing would be approaching it gently, and also continuing to show them that you love them because there's a lot of shame when we do realize that we're stuck in something and we've already burdened our friends by like telling them how bad it is and they've already said, well, why don't you get out? And there's shame then that sets in, which then isolates us. So really keeping the door open to those friends, instead of like closing it in any way. And again, still look out for yourself, set healthy boundaries. If it's too much, that's fine. Um, but if you can, keeping that door open so when they are ready, they feel safe to come to you because that can be really hard in that abusive bit too because it
Mhm.
can get kind of wearing on some of the people around sometimes, which again rightfully so. But if you have the capacity to leave the door open, is helpful. That's one thing I've noticed in my own life of like the people that didn't get exhausted by seeing me go through the same thing, because it's everyone's process and journey is going to be different. And it's so easy to say what we would do in a situation when we're not in it, right? Like
Yep.
I've heard a lot of people like, "Oh, I would do this." I'm like, "Would you?" Like, yeah, and I honestly, I always thought that too. Before I got into an abusive relationship, I would look at these, I'm like, "Well, if he's hitting her, why isn't she leaving?" And then I got into it, and it's there's a lot that goes into it. Attachment style, your nervous system. Again, sometimes it's tied to finances and where you live. And so it's so much is tied into it that it's not that black and white. So for anyone out there that thinks it is, it's not. And so having the kindness and the compassion and the grace for people that are in it, that are your friends, that you want to try and help move out, I would say just to try to leave that door open with that. That was a big help for me, knowing the friends that like no matter what, were there. They were open to hearing and reminding me kindly again, like, Tiff, you're worth this. The only reason you're worth more than this. Like the only reason I'm saying this is because I believe that you are worth more than this. And,
Mm.
I love you, and how can I help you? Is a big thing. How can I help you? Open-ended questions like that are really helpful with people as well, because then they are solving what they need themselves and then telling you, okay, well,
Mm.
this is what I would need to help with this, right? Versus like, you know, I want to do this for you. Okay, that might be not exactly what that person needs. Again, great suggestion. If they're like, I don't know, well, then you can maybe start suggesting things, but asking people, how can I help you get out of this? If do you want to get out of this? Yes or no? You do? How can I help you? So hopefully that answers a little bit. Again, it's
Oh,
not a one size
yeah.
fits all. Everyone's a little different. That's why relationships are so fascinating, why I love them, and also so frustrating because everyone's different.
Right. Oh my gosh. Well, you have a billion nuggets of wisdom in this half the short time together. So
Oh,
I am so grateful. I could talk to you for like 12
ah,
more years. So I probably should just have you back on the show and we can dive into maybe some of those other topics. So thank you so much for being here. I'll make sure your Instagram and all those things are in the comments and sent out in the email. So thank you again, Tiffany.
thank
Truly
you,
a gift.
Mickey. Thank you, everyone.
Well, you guys, please give Tiffany a huge thank you in the comment section. I know I learned so much. I can't wait to kind of sit with it and rewatch it to come up with some of those main points because this is something that will change lives if we can just learn more about it. So, thank you for being here. One resource that I always love to kind of leave each show with is like, what have I created that might help? Really, the only thing I could think of, being that I'm a little bit more grief focused, is I'm a huge fan of journaling. And I know Tiffany kind of mentioned that earlier, where it's like so important that you process and like actually acknowledge the situation at hand. And so I do have this cute little journal called All Weather Welcome. And you, as you can see, not every weather is okay. You've got your sunshine, you've got your rain clouds. No matter what you're feeling, I think it's important to come to the journal and feel, and it's a really affordable price. It's right on Amazon. So I'll make sure that that is in the comments because it's a great journal for anyone. It could be male, female, but it's probably a little more female focused. It's not a prompt journal; it's just a blank one. But we have gotten really good feedback that it resonates well with kids because it's kind of a cartoon on the front and it's got a kind of a cute message of all weather welcome. So, all that to say, check out the journal. And if you or anybody you know are in a situation, I'm going to also drop a comment with a link for it's called thehotline.org, which is an organization that helps people in all types of interpersonal violence situations, whether it's emotional abuse, physical, all that stuff, because we just want to make sure, in addition to connecting with Tiffany, which you absolutely all should, make sure that you have that hotline as a resource in your back pocket. Thank you guys so much for being here, for taking this little time out of your week to learn about how we can help ourselves and others heal. And I will see you next week. Bye.